Good evening, I'm Joel Flynn in Hong Kong. Welcome to ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Fresh worries over water safety in Hong Kong after excessive lead is found in a new public housing estate. Free speech worries grow over the government's independence crackdown as the Hong Kong National Party considers fighting back with their judicial review. And Air China flights are cut and pilots lose their licenses after one of them was found smoking in the cockpit and caused a plane to plunge 10,000 feet. Good evening. We begin tonight with renewed fears over the quality of tap water in the city's homes. The Democratic Party has found excessive levels of lead in the tap water of a new housing estate in Kwai Fong. It comes just 3 years after a huge tainted water scandal broke in the city. Evelyn Leung has the details.
Just how safe is your tap water at home? There are fresh worries over drinking water quality in Hong Kong after the Democratic Party uncovered excessive levels of lead at a new public housing estate in Kwai Fong. The party tested the supply at Kwai Tsui Estate after residents there complained theirs was coming out white and cloudy. Results showed concentrations of lead of up to 104 micrograms per litre. That's more than 10 times the World Health Organization's guideline of 10 micrograms per litre. This discovery comes after the Water Supplies Department tightened its safety checks following the 2015 lead contamination scandal that took the city by surprise.
Probably there are loopholes in the monitoring system, including the requirement for asking the licensed plumber to enforce the 3-cycle flushing procedures. We need to know who is going to supervise such flushing cycle. Are they all conducted in each of the apartments?
A Kwai Tsing district councillor slammed the government for not learning anything from the contamination scandal 3 years ago.
Only the fortunate point for the Kwai Tsui estate is that we discovered the problem before most of the residents moving in.
In mid-2015, water samples from 11 public housing estates with a total of 29,000 households were found to have contained excessive lead. More than 160 people were found to have higher than normal blood lead levels. There were fears more than 100 children could experience developmental delays after drinking the tainted water. A year after the scandal broke, an independent commission of inquiry determined that leaded solder on the pipes was a root cause of the problem. That's despite regulations requiring the solder to be lead-free. 2 former directors of a plumbing subcontractor were arrested afterwards for forging documents to cover up the usage of lead solder. Pipes at the affected estates were changed and regulations on water safety was tightened. But that doesn't seem to have prevented yet another health scare from breaking out.
Well, more groups have today spoken out against the government's plans to ban a pro-independence party due to national security concerns. The Hong Kong National Party says it is considering filing a judicial review in an attempt to fight back. Stephanie Choi has more.
Get rid of society's ordinance. That's what these protesters called for outside the Wan Chai Police headquarters today. They want Chief Executive Carrie Lam to stop Security Chief John Lee from banning the Hong Kong National Party. The protesters from groups such as the League of Social Democrats and Demosisto claim that the government's actions threaten Hong Kongers' free speech. The British Foreign and Commonwealth Office waded in, voicing concerns about the possible ban's effect on the freedom of expression. A spokesman stated while the office doesn't support Hong Kong independence, it said, quote, Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy and its rights and freedoms are central to its way of life, and it is important they are fully respected. On Tuesday, the police delivered 700 pages of documents to Hong Kong National Party convener Andy Chan's home, which included a notification letter that his party would be banned.
Before I receive the legal advice, I won't have any decision on further operation, further action, or even I don't know if I will reply to that letter. But there is a possibility that I will go through all those procedures and move on to JR.
The government has given the pro-independence organization 3 weeks to explain why it shouldn't be blacklisted under the Society's Ordinance, a law once reserved for the likes of triad groups.
The annual book fair kicked off this morning in Wan Chai's exhibition centre. A record number of 680 exhibitors are joining the 7-day fair this year. Some exciting book fans even started queuing up last night. Doors opened at 10 a.m. and off they went. Many ran to snap up autograph books of their favourite writers. Some book fans even came prepared with suitcases for their booty. The theme of this year's book fair is romance literature, featuring well-known authors including Eileen Chang, Eunice Lam and Lam Wing Sum. But with digital devices playing a more significant role in people's lives, some exhibitors say they do see a change in the reading culture here.
Everyone's holding onto their smartphones. It's taking up all their time and space, whether at school or at work. In the past, people would read while on public transport or during free time. Children and adults seem to have lost this space for reading. It's difficult to develop reading habits now.
Printed books are being moved online these days. But there are a lot of great things about physical books that you don't get from digital ones, so we are not really worried.
The Education Bureau has turned down Huayang College's direct application to join the direct subsidy scheme, saying only the all-boys secondary school does not fit the requirements. The century-old elite school said it is disappointed, but added it will look for alternative ways to provide better education for students from different backgrounds. It had hoped to change from a fully public school to the direct subsidy scheme, which would allow it to design its own curriculum and have more management freedom, as well as charge a school fee of $20,000 a year. All right, let's catch up on business now. Well, first to the latest news shaping markets here in Hong Kong. The city's stock exchange says it has reached an agreement with the Shanghai and Shenzhen bourses towards working with dual-class shares in the cross-border Stock Connect scheme. Hong Kong listed shares with weighted voting rights will now need to prove their trading stability before they can be included. The announcement comes after the mainland bourses surprised the city by refusing to expand the trading link with Hong Kong to foreign firms and those with weighted vote rights. The three exchanges will also set up a working group to come up with specific rules to resolve the dispute. Well, that announcement lifted shares in Xiaomi more than 3%, recovering after their tumble at the start of the week on news of the dispute. Another day in the red on the Hang Seng, though, down around 0.25%, reversing earlier gains. Apple supplier AAC Technologies led losses, plunging more than 4% over growing US-China trade war fears. Trade jitters obviously dragged the Shanghai Composite down lower as well, finishing the day 0.35% down at 2,788 points. Two Air China pilots have had their licenses cancelled after they forced an emergency descent on a flight because one of them was smoking in the cockpit. But their actions could have even more implications for the mainland market. China's aviation regulator is cutting 10% of Air China's Boeing 737 flights as well over the incident. The penalty could mean the airline has to cut poorly performing routes, potentially impacting millions of customers. Air China will also be the subject of safety scrutiny for the next 3 months and get a 50,000 yuan fine. China's biggest cab-hailing company, Didi Chuxing, is set to sell off its car services unit for an estimated $1.5 billion US. The ride-sharing and tech giant has been expanding rapidly overseas of late and could gain further momentum in an IPO later this year. Ed Giles reports.
Chinese rideshare giant Didi is set to spin off its car services unit in a deal that could be worth $1.5 billion. A number of Reuters sources said the deal would happen ahead of Didi's expected IPO later this year. Right now, the company's worth $56 billion. A listing by a company worth that much would be one of the biggest in recent years. The company bought out Uber's local operation in 2016 and cemented its status as China's top ride-sharing service. Didi's never confirmed its IPO plans, but spinning off a side unit that only just launched in April may signal they're getting ready for one. It's among a number of other Chinese tech firms looking to raise cash. Many have been eyeing Hong Kong Stock Exchange to do it. Recent reforms in the Asian financial hub have encouraged tech companies to go public. While a Didi IPO is just a theory right now, sources say the company's already tapped buyers for the sell-off, including long-time investor SoftBank Group of Japan. SoftBank's Vision Fund is the world's largest private equity fund at $93 billion last year.
The US Federal Reserve Chairman has said the best way forward for the American economy is to gradually raise interest rates. Speaking before the US Senate Banking Committee, Jerome Powell said the economy has several years of a strong job market ahead, with inflation around the Fed's 2% target. And while Powell didn't directly criticize President Donald Trump's trade spat with other countries, he called the tariffs absolutely the wrong approach. Investors jumped on the positive tone, pushing up Wall Street.
Well, I think he gave investors a little hope that he's very flexible. Right, he said he's going to look at the data that's coming in, especially because we have all this trade, these tariffs going on, these trade wars we're talking about. So he wants to monitor the situation, and if need be, maybe they'll hold back on raising interest rates, which I guess once they heard that, they were like, hey, green light.
Goldman Sachs officially named its president, David Solomon, as its new CEO. He'll take over from Lloyd Blankfein, who's stepping down after 12 years in the post. The investment bank confirmed Solomon's tenure will start in October, ending months of speculation over who will inherit the Goldman crown. Meanwhile, its quarterly profit and revenue surged, driven by strength in its investment banking and bond trading businesses. Net earnings shot up 40%, crushing analyst estimates, but shares in the company, which have been underperforming its rivals this year, fell overnight on Wall Street. Netflix fared even worse, though. Its shares tanked on Wall Street overnight after the company reported 1 million fewer new subscribers than expected. It follows a shortage of new blockbuster shows and competition from the FIFA World Cup. The numbers raised questions over the streaming company's future growth, with 6 brokerages cutting their prices. All right, time for a break now, but don't go away. I said would instead of wouldn't. The US president attempts a serious volte-face after facing backlash for siding with Russia over election meddling. More in just a moment.
We enrage. We envy. We resent. We dislike.
We breathe. We laugh. We cry. We live. We disappoint, we frustrate, we bore, we suffer.
We fear, we doubt, we defeat, we empower.
We communicate.
We talk.
We listen.
We learn.
We care. Jazzing up.
Touching hearts.
Paying attention.
Seemingly distant.
Deeply connected.
No food.
Need some food.
No shelter.
I have to build up my shelter.
No fresh water.
There we go. I need this.
No tools.
This I can make use of.
No camera crew.
There's just not enough to gather here. There's not enough to hunt.
Just one man alone in the wilderness, surviving. Survivor Man. Tonight at 8:30 on ViuTV 6. Take a trip to the land down under. Behind every native animal surviving in the wild.
Can we talk about this?
Or the furry babies living in different households.
This is a massive open gash. I don't think a positioning is too bad.
There's a dedicated veterinary team.
That's just such a good result.
Because animal lives matter.
Look after my girl.
Thank you so much.
Bondi Vet. Friday, Saturday and Sunday night at 8 on ViuTV 6. A man with a serious taste for travel.
So many people here tell us we couldn't go wrong. Oh, gorgeous.
Five-star hotelier becoming a tour guide.
Now, here we are. Come on, girls, will you come on? We're going today. Very nice.
Taking holiday makers on the surprise trip of a lifetime.
You all ready for this? And actually, all the people really enjoyed it. Happy, and laughing.
Francis Brennan's Grand Indian Tour, Saturday night at 7:30 on ViuTV 6. The best non-fiction features.
Everybody are very afraid to walk alone in the street.
It's very hard for Americans actually to go to Cuba. They don't want you to go there, even today.
New ways to engage reality.
The whole process is a life lesson for the kids. They see the evolution.
It could be the same, it could be something different. You know, it's really how you take it and what you learn from when you lose.
Transforming your 1 hour TV time into an exceptional cinematic experience. Theatre 96. Sunday night at 9:30 on ViuTV 6.
Welcome back. In India, rescuers are racing against time to search for people feared trapped in rubble after a 6-story building collapsed last night into a construction site next to it. At least 3 people were killed. The building in a suburb near New Delhi was only constructed a few years ago and did not appear to have many occupants. But local media reports say at least 50 people were feared trapped. A dog squad sent in to look for survivors didn't find any. Police said 3 people are now in custody in relation to the incident. A Reuters reporter detained in Myanmar has told a court he wasn't questioned by police about secret state documents he was accused of obtaining after his arrest. As Ryan Brooks reports, Wa Lone and his colleague were interrogated instead about their work about a Rohingya massacre.
A Reuters reporter on trial in Myanmar says interrogation after he and a colleague were arrested did not focus on what they're accused of, obtaining secret state documents. Instead, in testimony this week, journalist Wa Lone said officers focused on the pair's reporting of a massacre of Rohingya Muslims. His account was the most comprehensive challenge heard so far to accusations by the prosecution. They say Wa Lone and fellow reporter Cho So-u were detained at a routine traffic stop and found to be holding secret documents from an unknown source. Wa Lone described what he called a police trap to arrest them. He says they were handcuffed outside a restaurant. There, he says they'd been handed documents by a police officer they'd not met before. He also says police deprived the pair of sleep for 2 days, put hoods over their heads, and drove them to a secret detention site where they were held without contact for 2 weeks. Wa Lone spoke outside the court. I am really satisfied that I had the chance to speak the truth to the court. Although we told the authorities the truth, they didn't take note of that. At the time of their arrest, the pair had been working on an investigation into the killing of 10 Rohingya Muslim men and boys in a village in western Myanmar's Rakhine state. That event took place during a military crackdown. UN agencies say it led to more than 700,000 Rohingya fleeing over the border to Bangladesh last year. Wa Lone told the court that during interrogations, an officer offered a negotiation over their arrest if they agreed not to publish the massacre story. He quoted the interrogators as saying, "You are both Buddhists. Why are you writing about Kalars at a time like this? They aren't citizens." The word Kalar is a derogatory term used to describe people of South Asian origin, especially Muslims. The Reuters journalists are on trial for allegedly breaching the Official Secrets Act. It carries a maximum penalty of 14 years. Both have pleaded not guilty. Myanmar government spokesman Zaw Tay has declined to comment through the proceedings, saying the courts are independent and the case would be conducted according to the law.
One day after US President Donald Trump was grilled for siding with Vladimir Putin over Russian interference in American elections, things have taken a dramatic turn. Trump insists he simply left out a key negative, saying he meant the opposite of what he actually said in a joint news conference with the Russian president. New York correspondent Caroline Woods has the details.
Well, the fallout from that Helsinki summit continues, and now the White House is having to do some damage control to calm this political storm. President Trump has been facing a flurry of really scathing criticism from all sides after he failed to hold Russian President Putin accountable for meddling in the 2016 U.S. election. But now Trump is backtracking and saying he misspoke at that joint press conference. He said he meant to say, "I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia behind the meddling." Instead, he said, "I don't see any reason why it would be Russia," which casts doubt on the findings of the U.S. intelligence agencies. That has led Republicans and Democrats alike to accuse Trump of siding with an adversary rather than siding with his own country. Now, however, on Tuesday, the president came out and said he has full faith in America's intelligence agencies and has accepted their conclusions that there was Russian meddling in the election. However, he insisted Russia's actions had no impact on the outcome of the election and also added that it could have been other people as well. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer rejecting Trump's comments, calling them 24 hours too late.
The Syrian army launched intensive aerial strikes on a city in southern Daraa province late Tuesday, with reports of dozens of civilian casualties as the military pressed a Russian-backed offensive in the area. It comes as dozens of Syrians approached the Israeli frontier on the Golan Heights in an apparent attempt to seek help from a Russian-backed Syrian army offensive. But as Scarlett Saitanovich reports, they were turned back with a warning from Israeli forces.
Waving white cloth, dozens of Syrians trudged towards the Israeli frontier on the Golan Heights Tuesday in an apparent attempt to ask for help as Russian-backed Syrian forces close in on one of the last remaining rebel strongholds in the south of the country. They turned back after Israeli forces warned them to go before something bad happens. Hemmed in, the tens of thousands of Syrians that have arrived on Israel's doorstep have nowhere left to turn, which leaves them approaching a country they are technically still at war with. The offensive has triggered the single biggest displacement of the war, with several 100,000 people uprooted. Both Israel and Jordan have said they will not allow Syrians to cross into their territory. Israel, which seized the Golan in the 1967 Middle East War, is giving aid to encampments close by, while nervously watching as a war that's raged for over 7 years creeps closer.
We'll keep a close eye on what's happening in that part of the world, of course. All right, now time for a look at what's happening in the sporting world. Well, we start with cycling, and French rider Julien Alaphilippe claimed an impressive maiden victory on stage 10 of the Tour de France on Tuesday. It was the first stage victory by a home rider at this year's Tour. Alaphilippe broke clear with less than 30 kilometres to go and held his advantage over the final climb to take his first Tour stage win. Belgium's Greg van Avermaet was part of the breakaway group and finished fourth to maintain his grip on the yellow jersey. Four-time winner and defending champion Chris Froome is up to 6th overall. Turning to football, and the coach that led Iceland to its first ever World Cup has resigned. The country's football association says Heimir Hallgrímsson has stepped down at his own request after 7 years at the helm. The 51-year-old oversaw Iceland's debut run to the World Cup, where they became the smallest country by population to play in the tournament. Iceland opened impressively with a 1-1 draw against former world champions Argentina, but then lost to Nigeria and Croatia to exit at the group stage. Hallgrímsson also famously led Iceland to the quarterfinals of the European Championships 2 years ago. Dutch international Daley Blind has completed his move from Manchester United back to his former club Ajax Amsterdam. Ajax confirmed they'd struck a 4-year deal which could rise to $24 million. The 28-year-old joined United in 2014, but his first team opportunities have been limited under manager Jose Mourinho. Able to play in midfield or defence, Blind won the FA Cup with United in 2016 and the League Cup and Europa League titles the following year. He also made 90 Premier League appearances in 4 years at Old Trafford, but was limited to only 7 last season. And finally, in table tennis, the two Koreas once again came together for sportsmanship amid a warming of ties. North Korean players are competing in the 2018 World Tour Platinum Korea Open held in South Korea this week. The 25 people in the North Korean delegation, including 16 players, arrived in the central city of Daejeon on Sunday. Ahead of the matches, the two Koreas also formed unified teams in men's and women's doubles and mixed doubles at the tournament. On the first day of the tournament, North Korea's Cho Il and South Korea's Yoo Yun Chong beat a Spanish team in a preliminary round of the mixed doubles.
Honestly, I was moved and so happy when I hugged Choi Il after the match. Even if it's not the first prize, it felt like the first prize for me.
Looks like something I'm sure I could handle. All right, that is it for now. Do make sure you join us again at 11:30 when we'll be updating you on the National Party latest and, of course, that news out of Kwai Fung. For now, though, I'm Joel Flynn. Do join us at 11:30, but for now, have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Coming up next, Blazing Team. There's a saying that goes, all you need is 6 dots to connect the world.